Well, hello, everybody. My name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. I have the honor today of interviewing Harold Cook of Anderson Township, and we are here at the Anderson Library. And our camera operator today is Michael Alfieri, and we're ready to go. And Harold, it's just a wonderful thing for me to have the opportunity to talk to you and meet you, and we've never met before. And this is one of the interesting things about veterans groups is that we keep drawing people out of the woodwork, and the word gets around. And as you know, some people are reluctant to talk, and others are very willing to talk, and we're very happy that you are one of those that is willing to talk.
And I feel like it's an honor for me too. I haven't belonged to either the American Legion or VFW, but I feel like it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you, and we thank the library for that. They've done a wonderful job. This program, as I said earlier, was started by the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., when they felt that with the dwindling ranks of our World War II veterans particularly, there were 16 million at one time. Now we're down to about 4 million. And that graph on the wall is going up at an alarming rate, as you well know.
Right.
But there's still so many that we want to talk to, and we want to get the stories. And yours is a very important one.
Appreciate that.
You're an Ohioan by birth?
No, actually I was born in Beaver, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
But a year and a half, my dad owned a dairy in Warren, Ohio. And so we moved to Ohio, which was just short distance from Pennsylvania.
Sure.
So I was there until I went to college and worked in the dairy and then went to college for 2 years at Hiram College.
Hiram, oh yeah.
And then I went to Ohio State for a short time, but he got pneumonia and finally scarlet fever. And at that time, he isolated scarlet fever from anyone that handled any food.
Yes, of course.
So I had to come home and work in the dairy, and that kind of interrupted things. But shortly after that, then I got married, and they said I could either join the armed forces or I'd be drafted. So I joined the Navy in December of '42.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, that's interesting. Just almost a year after Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. December the 7th. Well, the interesting thing to me about you is that you served in the South Pacific, and that was the area of I had 4 years in the Navy, from early '42 to late '46, and but your experience. Did you get a feeling for the Navy in particular? Is that why you?
Well, I guess by the biography you can tell. I had 2 years of biology at Hiram College,
Oh,
and
yes.
so the Navy offered me what was called a hospital apprentice first class, which was above a apprentice seaman.
Yeah.
So it was a promotion already.
Sure. Right.
And of course, I didn't know what that meant, except that the biology background meant that was more suitable to the hospital work. So after I finished boot camp at Great Lakes, well, then I went right directly to the hospital training at Great Lakes. And then there was an opportunity to go to a lab tech school at Bethesda, Maryland Naval Center, which was, I didn't realize it first, but that was the Walter Reed Hospital of the Navy.
Oh, yes, of course.
And it was a real experience there. And I guess I wrote somewhere that we had 5 courses in blood chemistry, serology, hematology, parasitology, and if you got less than 70 on a weekly quiz, you went to North Africa. So it behooved you to study.
Absolutely.
So after 10 weeks of that, why, then they sent me to Farragut, Idaho. I had no idea where Farragut, Idaho was.
The wilds of the West.
And near Coeur d'Alene, but all in that area of
San
Sandpoint.
Antonio.
So I looked at a map and Asphalt, Idaho, and I said, what, Asphalt, Idaho? Well, it was a whistle stop, but the rumor was that Eleanor Roosevelt chose this on Lake Coeur d'Alene as a naval training station for not the California area, but the in-between for Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and so it was recruit training for those areas.
Right.
And we had probably 3,000 a week that we gave inoculation
Amazing.
and training. And of course, it was a small lake, but it was a little bit of water there. So I was there until I was told that they had an APA 205 at Permanente Shipyard from California.
Now tell us about it. What's an APA?
Attack transport. It was built by Kaiser. One of these, it was the same hull as the Liberty ship, but it was much faster. And it was, well, our rumor was it was riveted seams instead of welded seams. And supposedly the problem in the North Atlantic was that they broke apart.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that was the critical part. Excuse me. That the welded seams were just not holding up in the rough water.
Right.
But the welded seams, or the riveted seams, well, they were fine.
Sure. Well, that's interesting because that vessel might have been built at either Portland, Oregon, or Vancouver, Washington, at the Kaiser shipyards.
You know, this one came out of Permanente Shipyard,
Oh yeah.
and if you recall, there was an explosion at Pittsburgh,
Yes,
in
Pittsburgh,
California, shortly before that.
Terrible.
So I had no idea what we were getting into, but
Wow.
this ship had medical facilities. We had 3 doctors, dentists, and operating facilities, and laboratory and pharmacy.
So they, those needing medical care on other vessels would come to your APA
Right,
where you had this
Right.
big establishment.
right. So it basically was to land troops and to wait offshore for casualties.
Right, right,
And we did that in Okinawa.
right.
But we had shakedown crews, of course, in San Diego, long coast, and then back up to Honolulu. Then we finally picked up troops and took them to Philippines.
Wow.
And then we came back and got another load. And that's the first load we took up to Okinawa and back. And then the second load we just dropped off at Manila.
Now, in this type of an operation, how would your APA receive people for medical care? They were brought in.
Basically, they all had shots, so that wasn't a problem.
I see.
But it was, well, of course, as anything,
Wounded.
not in the beginning. We had troops that were all ready to be landed for action. So they were brought on as ready for action. And we either got them in California or in Honolulu.
I see.
And there wasn't much that way other than maintaining. And of course, if they had liberty, well, then we had venereal diseases and things of that sort.
Right.
We always had those syphilis and gonorrhea and things that came back that we had to identify. And the most of it was more preventative medicine there and trying to keep them all well so that they were, when we landed, they were able to go to.
Well, one of the interesting things, of course, and I'm sure that people who will view this interview, Harold, are interested in learning about not only what you did, but where you were. And of course, the battle for Okinawa, which was the last great battle of World War II, was so crucial and was so critical and really a desperate battle because the Japanese had withdrawn. Okinawa is just south of the main island of Kyushu, as you know, in the Japanese Empire, um, between the Japanese islands and the Philippine islands, and the Ryukyu group. One of the things that's always fascinated, I was not at the Battle of Okinawa. By this time, I'd been transferred back to the States, but reading about the Battle of Okinawa, of course, one of the great things was the biggest battleship in the world, the Yamato of the Japanese Imperial Navy, which had 18.1-inch rifles on her. Now, when you were at Okinawa, did you see enemy ships? And
Not really from where we were. We landed troops there, but this was 30 days after D-Day, so
okay,
we were, we'll say, not in the initial action,
right,
but we landed troops more to clean up and that type
Okay.
of thing, and then laid offshore
laid
in
offshore.
order to pick up casualties.
I see.
And
So you had Army casualties
Yeah.
come aboard, as well as
right.
Marines and
Right.
Navy and so
Right.
forth.
Mhm.
One of the interesting things about the Battle of Okinawa was that, as I mentioned, this great battleship, the Yamato, which was the biggest ship ever built at that time, and she had the biggest rifles on her. And I'm sure you know this, but I'll just bring it out. That the Japanese were so desperate that they planned this suicide event for the Yamato. And the idea was to run her aground so that she could turn her rifles shoreward
Mm.
to fire on the American troops.
Oh,
That
I didn't know that.
that was the main idea of the Japanese strategy, and they were so desperate at that time because they had now had to withdraw to these little islands offshore of the main empire. But this great ship was intercepted by Navy pilots and flyers and American destroyers, several of which she sank before we finally got through to her, and she was eventually sunk at sea,
Oh,
never getting to perform the final battle that they had planned for her. And she was sunk offshore before she got to Okinawa by, I think she was hit by 5 of our torpedoes and, of course, bombs and rockets from our naval aircraft.
yeah, there's things I didn't know.
Yeah.
because we were
Well, it's a
kind
great
of
story.
way over. Yeah, I'm glad to know that.
It's a great
That's
story.
Interesting.
Well, there are several books about the Battle of Okinawa, and I know that Michael has them here in the library, and you can check them out
Okay.
and read about that. But I thought that was a very interesting
Yes.
fact of history that a lot of people don't know about. Well, now as a corpsman, and I had some experience. I was on a baby flat top in the Philippines. That was my last ship. I was on 3 different ships during the war, but my last one was on a baby flat top. That was same kind of hull
Mm-hmm.
as yours.
Is that right?
Yeah, the CVE, the baby escort carriers that were built by Kaiser at the Kaiser shipyards in Vancouver, Washington,
Oh, I see.
on the Columbia River. which is right across from Portland, Oregon. And they were built on the same kind of a hull as your APA. And they just put a flat top on it. And whereas yours had different superstructure,
Yeah.
different accommodations, of
Right.
course.
Right.
How many were in your crew? You know that?
We had, I think, between 300 and 400.
Wow, that's a good sized crew.
Yeah.
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 Now this vessel is about, if it was the same kind of hull that my old escort carrier was, about 500 feet long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
About 90.
Got a picture of it, of course.
Oh, good. Let's hold that up and see if that'll show here on the camera. Well, it's very small. I don't know if you can get that, Michael, or not. It's a beautiful ship, and as Harold has pointed out to us, these were mass produced, and along with the same kind of a hull for other transports, Liberty ships, as Harold pointed out, and also the baby flat tops. And as a matter of fact, Harold.
Here's a little bit more about it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. This is marvelous. Attack transports are U.S. answer to war of distance. Fast transports built for the broad Pacific. Well, there we are. AP-5 ships. Answer to challenge of great distances. Well, that was one of the great things about these vessels, and you know, the genius of Henry Kaiser. I mean, he was a brilliant industrialist. He was a great friend of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Roosevelt said, is reported to have said, Henry, we need this, we need that, we need this kind of a ship, we need that kind of a ship. Devise something for us, and we need them fast. And Kaiser, brilliant genius that he was, and his people designed these vessels, and then built the facilities to produce them.
Yeah.
And I know at one time, I know vessels like this were going down the ways of Kaiser shipyards here in Washington State, in Oregon, and in California, at the rate of maybe one every 30 days, you know.
Yeah.
1943 and 44, 45. Now, tell me more about your duty aboard ship. What was your rate at this time?
I was pharmacist, made third class.
Third
and
class.
I made second class.
You made second. Good.
And, see if I can describe it. We were
Sure.
near the fantail, just inside from the medical care, like hospital beds and so forth. And we had a pharmacy midships that would go between the two passages. And the pharmacy had passageways on both of them. And then I had a little laboratory about as big as a closet, and a microscope and centrifuge and things like that I could do urines and bloods and just small tests for maintaining
Sure.
basic medical care.
So you had to know chemistry and
Yeah, right. Yeah, see, we had some of that at Bethesda, Maryland Naval Hospital.
Right.
2 weeks of it, but then
pretty intense.
you learned or else, right? And so it was basic test tube type thing, but it was interesting.
Right.
Well, then I began to learn a little more about pharmacy too. It's kind of a sideline to it, but one set of troops of the Army that we left at Manila, one of the soldiers went berserk in Corregidor, right there at the Manila Bay, and hit my pharmacist that was an undertaker by trade, but he was a pharmacist on board ship, and we had mayonnaise jars full of alcohol, either for mouthwash or cough syrups and elixir turpentine hydrate with codeine, remember that one?
Oh, my
Well,
God.
anyway, that was a common one.
Sure.
The officers wanted to drink that
Mix
because
it
it's
up
about
a little
half
bit.
percent alcohol, you know? But
Torpedo
anyway, he
juice.
wanted something to drink, one of these soldiers that was in the hold. And he come up and it was at midnight. I had been sleeping in the lavatory, which was across on the port side, and this was on the starboard side. And this pharmacist had been sleeping in the, and he took one of these pipes, the dog, the hatch,
Mhm.
and hit him over the head 24 times. And so then he jumped out, went aft, and jumped overboard. So, of course, we went into Manila Bay, and we had to account for him. And
Sure.
finally, in 3 days, they found out that he had jumped overboard and
Oh,
committed
my
suicide.
goodness.
But this fellow, we had to take 24 stitches in him in order to get him back together.
But he lived.
But he lived. You know,
Wow.
He's in Middleport, New York now.
How about that?
But it would have been me if I had been sleeping there,
Yes,
so it was that
that's-
close.
Just by the grace of
But
God.
it was one of those things that we had about 2,800 soldiers, and of course they were kept down there almost 2 weeks, you know, from the time we left San Francisco till we got to Manila.
Mhm.
So it was one of those things that you get claustrophobia. Now they come up for the mess hall and would eat and then go back down, or they could come up on deck and exercise. But there wasn't any real much they could do while we were underway.
Oh, that's right.
But the
Yeah. Go ahead.
and we had a dentist there too, so
Oh,
they
you did.
did dentistry as well as
Mhm.
medical care.
Well, my experience in the Navy was the medical corps of the Navy was wonderful, and as you point out,
Right.
so well trained.
Right.
And
And it was very complete. I mean,
oh yeah.
they did things that, you know, you probably, even today, of course, we didn't have penicillin at that time, we had sulfa,
Cell phone.
and so consequently, the treatments were longer and
Yes.
less effective, for antibiotics weren't even mentioned at that time.
Right.
And so there was a lot of changes in that.
Did you aspire to be a pharmacist?
No,
peacetime?
well, I worked part-time in a drugstore after that, but basically I went back to Ohio State and got my bachelor's and master's in bacteriology.
Oh,
And so then I came to Cincinnati and as a bacteriologist,
really?
and I was the city of Cincinnati in the health department.
Oh my, that's outstanding.
So then I became superintendent of the laboratory there. And after 32 years and 3 years in the Navy, they told me I could retire. Now I've been retired 21 years.
How about that? How about that? Well, that is outstanding. I think that.
It goes fast.
Well, you see, this to me is very impressive. It's very important what you've done, what you've accomplished, and it shows to also to people who are unfamiliar with things like this. Even though war is a very, very terrible thing, war is a very demanding thing in the way of treating people.
Right.
Not only the military, but civilians are affected on shore in different countries, and what comes out of this sort of demand, the development of antibiotics and penicillin, particularly, of course. Well, sulfa was a very, very important thing, wasn't it?
It was, especially wounds and things of that sort, you know. And sulfadiazole, of course, was a very important one.
Right.
But I think the Navy was very good to me, partly because I'd had a specialty after I went to lab tech school at Bethesda. But at the time, I thought, well, but I avoided a lot of hand-to-hand combat, you know, and like you were mentioning in Okinawa, well, the shells were going over us, and we were landing troops and so forth, so it was kind of like watching the war.
Well, of course.
But and it was.
Did you have a feeling of, when you experienced that sort of thing, did you have a feeling of anything in particular?
I wasn't unsafe in any way. I mean, I wasn't really, I knew we were landing soldiers and so forth, but I wasn't, I didn't feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Of course, the ship itself was pretty secure. It was a big ship.
Now, did this vessel have armament on it, guns?
Yeah, we had anti-aircraft guns. We had a, 3-inch cannon on the back.
Oh, yeah.
And the aft, and then we had, 20 millimeter?
20 millimeter, probably, anti-aircraft.
Yeah, and
And
they
maybe
went
40
off.
millimeter.
We had lots of power.
Sure.
Yeah, it was good that way.
Did your ship, what was the number of your ship?
205.
205. Did the 205 come under attack by the enemy or anything like that, aircraft?
Not specifically that. I mean, in going back and forth between San Francisco and Hawaii, there wasn't any.
No.
And then there wasn't any action really. See, this was in 45, 44, 45, even along Guam, Saipan, and we always laughed about Ulithi because there was nothing there. But no, it wasn't really any problem with our ship.
Well, that is so interesting, and a vessel of that nature, I had no experience with anything like that, but like the APs. But to imagine what was contained on that vessel to accommodate what you were doing.
Right. We had LCVPs and LSTs and also landing craft. So
Right.
That were available to go to Liberty and Sherburne.
Now, did you get all your supplies, say in Pearl Harbor before you left, or were you supplied at sea or in the Philippines?
In the
as well?
Philippines and Pearl Harbor and San Francisco. Right.
Okay. Now, by this time, the Philippines were pretty secure, were they?
Yes, although there was a lot of ruins there. I mean,
Yeah.
it just wasn't
Oh, it was
spread all around the,
terrible.
yeah.
That beautiful city of Manila.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Philippines were secured on the 5th of July, 1945.
Yeah.
So in July, you were still aboard, weren't you?
Mm-hmm. Right.
How long were you aboard that vessel?
Until, I have to see. Let's see, we went across the equator on the 10th, and I've got a copy of this if you're interested in it too.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. They'd like to
And,
have that here.
Yeah, I left the ship on August the 4th. It so happened that they came on board and said that if you wanted to go to midshipman school in Colgate University, and if you'd had some college education, why, you could apply for it in January. Well, of course, I assumed that was like nebulous, it would never happen, you know. Well, on August the 4th it came through, so they took me off of the ship on August the 4th, gave me the President Johnson, which was an old President Johnson liner that was sold to the Japs for scrap, and they reconditioned it for bringing troops back from the Philippines back to the States. Well, the top speed was 9 knots, and you could watch the water go by, you know, it was.
Well, you could walk faster than that.
So it took us 45 days, a month and a half, to get from Manila to San Francisco. And the points were lowered, the atomic bomb was dropped, and then we talked. And so by the time we got back to San Francisco, they said the points were lowered, and it said you'd go home for 30 days and be discharged in Toledo. So I said, thank you.
And glad to be home.
Right.
I should say. Well, and then that's when you went back to Ohio State.
I got my bachelor's and master's.
Oh my,
That
that,
GI Bill, so we lived on $125 a month.
I remember it well.
I've got, I don't know whether you want copies of the discharge papers.
Well, it'd be interesting to see, of course.
This is a separation.
Sure. Well, that, you know, the GI Bill was so important, not only to the individual, but also to our nation, because it made education available.
Oh, it was.
And people that probably never would have gotten it.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And it gave us subsistence. Of course, we had a little girl after that. And then, you know, and I worked part-time and things of that sort, but it was
Right.
still something that made it available for you.
Of course.
And we were there 3 years, and we didn't live luxuriously, but it was something we could do.
Sure, and of course you were in a rather exciting college environment
Yeah,
there.
right.
Ohio State is hard to beat.
Right.
I didn't go to that school, but having lived in Ohio now for 54 years, I've become very much an Ohioan, and I'm very follower.
Just tell some of the separations. And,
Yes.
you know,
Now that's very important. The decorations. You have of course, you have the American Defense
yeah,
Medal.
I brought those
Oh
all.
yes.
Nobody wants to see them, but anyway.
Well, they're handsome and they are important. Yeah. There's the Asiatic Pacific Medal, and let's see now the blue one here. You don't have that one. do you?
Good conduct over here, and this American Theater.
That's the American Theater there, and this is a Philippine Liberation here,
Right.
and this is the Asiatic Pacific,
Mhm.
meaning that you served in the Pacific Theater.
And
And this blue one on the end is the American Defense. You don't have that.
no,
You don't have that
and
with you.
their star is for the Philippines.
The star is for the Philippines. The bronze star means that you participated.
Right.
Participated,
Right.
and that's why you're entitled to wear that. And the Philippine Liberation Campaign Medal. Yours is like mine, faded.
60 years of.
Oh boy, I should say. Well, Harold, that's just wonderful. I think. Do you have anything else you'd like to tell us?
No, I was 21 when I went in and 24 when I came out. And I think in my lifetime it was a good experience.
Absolutely.
And I think the Navy was good to me
Yes.
in a sense of education as
Yes.
well as an experience I never would have had.
Talk about broadening.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And my wife has said, well, you know, with this Iraqi war and all those things that are going on today, but the whole country was in back of World War II.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, USOs and the treatment, and I was going to show you one of these things that I don't know whether you remember them or not. I had to look them up myself. This is some of that female.
Oh yes.
And this was a friend of mine that was in the Guam at that time.
Mhm.
Oh, that's
That's
going
your-
across the equator.
That's your becoming a shellback.
Yeah, and this was one at Christmas time, and the V-mail was a freebie too, you know, it was one of those things that they photographed, and this is for my brother at Camp Hood in Texas,
Right.
so.
Yeah, V-mail was another brilliant thing that was concocted by somebody that allowed servicemen abroad to receive mail very quickly,
Yes,
very
Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah.
and instead of being bulky like letters and that sort of thing, this could be sent very rapidly, and you
Right.
could get the news
and,
better, because that was one of the things, particularly in the Pacific. Boy, it was hard to get newspapers or anything like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
you know. And then you have your shellback certificate here, which is issued to the person when he crosses the equator. Before you cross the equator, you're a polywog. Then when you cross the equator and you're initiated into the realm of the deep, Neptune's realm,
Yeah. Neptune.
then you become a shellback. And that makes you a whole person.
And then this is one of the newsletters that said the war was over.
Oh, yeah. Japan asks for peace.
Yeah.
I should say, that is very wonderful to have.
I just looked up some of these things that just kind of brought back memories of, this is one of the newsletters that we had on board.
On board, yes, the scuttlebutt.
And then this one said the war is over.
How about that?
I don't know how much of this you want copied or.
Well, you can
have it. Or
you can work that out with Michael here at the
Okay.
library, and depending on what they would like to have. These are very important things to have,
Yeah.
because they show, not only did we get, not only did we get V-mail and letters from home and things like that, but aboard ship.
Yeah.
There was a publication, I know,
Right.
my old carrier, we had a publication that came out daily, and they would derive the information from radio.
This tells us when Roosevelt died.
Oh my
On
goodness.
April 13th, 1945.
1945. Isn't that something? Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the only man who served more than 2 terms.
Yeah.
My goodness, isn't that something? I remember I was in San Francisco that day when he died. Well, Harold, this has been a wonderful experience. We thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate you asking me.
Well, I just,
Letting me volunteer, I guess.
well, it's just a wonderful thing that you've done to impart to people, and this goes on record, and I guess it'll eventually will be available for anybody who wants to hear about it. I hope you've told your family about it.
I did.
What you did.
I did.
And good. That's very important, because so many people have gone on already who died with information that they didn't impart,
Right.
and that's a sad thing.
Are there any of these papers that you have to have?
Well, Michael will tell you about that.
Oh, okay.
You've got that to
Yeah. I think-
settle up with him, and
Okay.
again, we thank you very much for
Well, thank
your
you.
wonderful participation.
Ed, I enjoyed it very much.
Well, it's been a pleasure and an honor for me, and Michael, we're back to you.